People say that first impressions matter the most. Sure, you can say that about any first episode or beginning to a movie, but with Gundam, I feel like that's even more true. Experiencing the very first Gundam episode from the late 70s ended up subconsciously giving me unrealistic expectations for any other Gundam series going forward just because of how good it is. Hell, I even use it to compare other series that reimagine that first episode. Series like Gundam GQuax or The Origin are both series that I enjoyed to varying degrees, but one thing I really enjoyed was how they recreated or played around with the events that set off the original Gundam series. For GQuax, making Char more involved with the events that took place in that episode subconsciously reinforced how important Amuro getting into the Gundam was and how cunning of a strategist and pilot Char is when he is given a monster of a mobile suit to play around with. And for The Origin, it added a ton of new elements and scenes that kept the essence of the original series present while also feeling really distinct from it. Both of those things share one thing in common with me though, and it's how after reading or watching them, they always bring me back to the very first episode that it's based on without fail because of how incredible it is, and how it set the standard for Gundam series going forward. I made a video a while back, briefly talking about how that very first episode has gone on to inspire so many Gundam series and how other anime with how their stories handle their first episodes. And even to this day, you can see the spirit of the first Gundam episode making its way into even more recent entries in the franchise. As most of my video ideas usually pop up in my head, I was in the shower thinking to myself, you know what? I really could just talk about how amazing the first ever Gundam episode is for an entire video. And here I am today, ready to gush about what to me is the very best first episode I have ever seen. And not just from an anime. So welcome back everyone, I'm Cheems, and this is the episode that quite literally inspired several generations of anime to come.
Gundam 大地に立つ
Before getting into why this episode deserves so much praise, I need to talk about the key members of this episode's production and how their contributions made this episode so incredible. There's this thing that people do where they commonly associate a particular work to a singular person. And I've like how people say Neon Genesis Evangelion is from the singular mind of Hideaki Anno, which can be true if you mean it's his work as a director, but to me that kind of brushes away most of the efforts from a lot of the important staff members. Staff members who helped work together to make a series like that. I'm sometimes guilty of that, since, you know, it's a very easy thing to say. People say that about Gundam as well, and while yes, it is Tomino's work, it has been noted by Tomino himself that a few of the iconic characters from the series weren't creations from him, but from the writing staff. I didn't come up with episodes like the one where Amuro deserts the White Base, likewise the one with the war refugee Persia and her child, or the one where Matilda suddenly appears. I remember being furious because I couldn't figure out how to connect these to the story of the White Base. However, when character designer Yoshikazu Yasuhiko drew this ridiculous character of a beautiful woman in man's clothing, I really fell for her. He had transformed in the process of materializing the concept from the script. This is the same thing with another great duo. This produced that legendary couple, Rambaral and Hamun. Because I left it to the writer, first they presented their unique idea and narrative, and then the dramatic task of conforming it to a Gundam-like story fell to me. I was fired up when I dramatized this couple. He even noted that after a certain time, his attention was focused on being a supervisor of the production, and from episodes 7 to 21, he left the story in the hands of the script writing team. This was a time when we had momentum and couldn't imagine the program being cut short, so I left the writing of scripts to the script writers. Of course, we held meetings, but I didn't have any time to write the story. For that reason, this became a period in which the story had a high degree of independence, where distinctive characters appeared and ridiculous developments took place. I was burdened with the hardship of having to apply my energies to dramatizing this as a single storyline centered on the White Base. I mean, I don't really have to tell you how amazing that stretch is because you've probably heard it a billion times already. So it's obvious that series like Gundam and Evangelion are all collaborative efforts. And I think noting the great people who worked on this episode is more healthy and more helpful rather than just pinning all of my praise to one guy when it's clear that multiple efforts make these shows possible. So starting off, I think it's important to note the chief of the series who was responsible for making the lyrics for the opening and the ending, as well as a decent amount of storyboards for the series. We know him and love him, it's Yoshiyuki Tomino. And he is responsible for boarding this entire episode. I've said this countless times and I'll say it again. Tomino's storyboards are really damn good most of, if not all of the time. It's really cool to see that in even most of his recent series, his boards don't let up, especially regarding action. It's so cool hearing how in Reconquista and G, he sometimes doesn't give much instructions outside of the usual boards that animators had to follow, making animators passionate and excited to go all out, and as a result, Tomino's boards really shine due to their efforts. So many incredible moments I remember from series like Ideon, Brainpowered, Burst Gundam, and all the other Gundam works that he's created storyboards for regularly pop up in my head all the time. I don't want to sound like I'm sucking the dude's dick a lot, but he's been so consistently good for decades. And his board, especially for this episode, is absolutely worthy of praise. So many shots involving really creative dynamic angles, shots that make great use of scale, just looking at the physical storyboard and then immediately seeing the episode itself afterwards really solidified how great it was. And it's even more crazy considering that this isn't even his best board in my opinion, even though it's extremely good. I'd say my favorite one from him is probably from Be Invoked. A shot in particular involving a pan up, that great use of the flashing red light marking what is guiding the cast at this point, and another character communicating dialogue through the reflection of the main character's helmet. It's so good. It really gets the tense and claustrophobic feel across. And I'd say it's probably my favorite cut in all of anime if I'm being perfectly honest. Sorry for the small tangent, I just really love his boards. For the episode director, we have Shinya Sadamitsu. He's been involved in a decent amount of Tomino's series, such as Invincible Steelman Daitarn 3, as both a storyboard artist for 10 episodes and an episode director for over 13 episodes. He's also worked on Invincible Superman Zambot 3, but only on 4 episodes as an episode director and storyboard artist for only 2. And on Space Runaway Ideon, he was an episode director for only 2 episodes and a storyboard artist for 1 episode. However, with Mobile Suit Gundam, he not only boarded 8 episodes, but he directed 12. And a lot of the episodes he worked on are some of the very best episodes in the entire series. It's clear that he was most involved in this series. And if I had to say what his strongest suit is, it's definitely the psychedelic stuff. A lot of his episodes can have great action or eerie and creepy set pieces. And the Duel in Texas and a Cosmic Glow episodes are probably the best example of how astonishing his skills are as a storyboard artist and director for how otherworldly they are. Next up, we have Hiroyuki Hoshiyama, who is responsible for the script of this episode. He's worked on this series quite a bit, serving as a screenwriter for 13 total episodes. He's worked with Tomino before on Zambot 3 for 3 episodes. He worked on 15 episodes of Daitarn 3, which is almost half of the entire series, and he even came back to work on Turn A Gundam 20 years after this series aired. He wrote the script for 11 episodes, and several of these episodes, including the first episode, are some of my favorite episodes in all of Gundam. Hell, maybe even anime in general. Episodes like Howl at the Moon, Diana Descends, Underground Passageways, Diana's Hard Fight, and Sack Tracker are some of the episodes that come to mind. So yeah, Hoshiyama's that guy. Another powerhouse who was involved in this episode was Yoshikazu Yasuhiko, or Yas. I have a feeling some of you guys watching might know who he is already. Outside of being the main character designer of the series and serving as the chief animation director of the series production, Yas was also an animation director for this episode on top of 13 other episodes before he was unfortunately hospitalized during the series production. His work on this series, as well as the eventual compilation films, are extremely significant. On the third film specifically, he did almost all of the animation layouts, which were so detailed that the final animation in the film ended up looking extremely similar to the original layout's drawings. His corrections across the series were always great, and whenever he animated, he always left an impact. From expressive, subtle, or comedic character acting to stunning action across several decades in shows in and out of the Gundam franchise. His work on this episode specifically isn't light at all. On top of doing layouts, he also corrected a decent amount of animation on top of animating a bit. It can't be overstated how much talent and heavy hitters this series really had. And despite all of the production troubles this series faced, all the fantastic staff and creatives involved ended up making something truly special and inspiring. So I guess, without further ado, let's start this love letter to this first episode with the opening narration. Presenting a lot of very important information at the very beginning of a story can often be frowned upon depending on how they're handled. And honestly, there's no perfect way to present vital information like First Gundam's, because it really comes down to the type of story and what it's trying to accomplish early on. Is the story one where you need this information shared before the story begins in order to understand what is even going on in the first few scenes of the movie? Is it a story that doesn't present much information at the beginning, thus making me ask more questions the more I watch it? It all really depends, and there's no real bad form of presenting exposition like opening narration or opening crawls, montages. It's how they are handled is what makes them as good or as bad as they are. So Gundam's approach here isn't groundbreaking by any means. That doesn't mean it isn't effective, because I don't think I would have been as drawn into the world of Gundam without it. At the surface, the information is extremely simple to understand. Humanity has long since migrated into space. The Principality of Zeon launched a war of independence against the Earth Federation, and because of that, over half the population has perished. Simple stuff, right? Well, originally in Hoshiyama's script, this narration and display of information wasn't here. Tomino, under the alias Minoru Yokitani, added this little introductory narration in his storyboard for this episode, and honestly, it was one of the best additions in this episode. All of the imagery really helps this narration stick with me, and it's so iconic even now. Need to show that humanity has moved into colonies in space? Sure. War broke out? Let's show all of that. Half of the population died because of this sudden war? Here's a bunch of shots showing just how insanely horrific this war is. Again, not the most groundbreaking thing to ever grace television, but it gives such an imposing and striking first impression. And what's better is that we already have a decent understanding of what is happening in this world, to the point that we won't be completely lost the second we start actually learning more about it. Outside of the brilliant opening narration, how does the actual beginning of the episode fare? Well, it's just as good. At the beginning of the episode, there's a solid minute of 3 Zakus infiltrating a colony with absolutely zero dialogue, and it is so fucking good. One of my favorite cuts is actually the very first one. The episode opens with the camera facing Earth, which at first gave me an expectation that we were going to zoom in to Earth, but instead, the camera pulls us farther and farther away from it, drifting to the right into the far reaches of space, until we are suddenly interrupted by the face of a Zaku as it and 2 others continue forward, guiding us to where it is headed. It's one of those opening shots that will always sit in my mind. Kind of like the first ever shot in Star Wars. So much information presented in one single continuous shot, and I just adore shit like that. I always get so happy when I see it reimagined or even paid tribute to. G-Quux's subversion of that shot is so good and fun, and I love it a lot. Overall, seeing the Zakus enter the colony and thus helping us, the viewer, see the inside of the colony through their eyes is just as good. And that's the thing that I want to start gushing about. It's world building through not just shot composition, but through natural dialogue and explicitly through action. And I don't mean world building as the physical colony that we see more of, but the state of the universal century here and now. The iconic Char Aznable makes a brief appearance in this episode as the guy who's giving orders to the other Zaku pilots. But one of his own men ends up committing treason by trying to seek glory like him, thus making me wonder what type of glory Char sought after to get into the position that he is at currently. You get some dialogue involving some people's thoughts on the war itself, like Hayato, and we were already explicitly told and shown how the population has gone down by a huge number, but through Amuro's father looking at his son's portrait and talking to Bright Noah, who is also very young, we end up getting told that the efforts of Temray and his Gundam will be for the younger generation like Amuro and Bright, so that they won't need to be sent into a hellish war that kids their age already are. It's not like a crazy revelation that gets tremendous focus placed onto it, but it adds so much more flavor to the world and reiterates once more that the state of the world right now is pretty fucked up. Moving on from world building, I found that the most important aspect of this episode, to me, isn't Char's introduction, the White Base's arrival to the colony, brief introductions to the characters that we'll be following for the rest of the series, but our protagonist, Amuro Ray. Looking back at this episode with the sole purpose of analyzing it for a video made me realize how much action Amuro takes in this episode. He's not really a character who is fully reactive or active to me at times, as there's multiple parts in this series where he realizes that trying to be active and trying to take on Zeon on his own is pretty much impossible. But in this episode, he does so much on his own. He rejects evacuation orders, he ignores his father's orders, and he pilots a prototype war machine to fend off the invading Zaku's when nobody else could. It's a really damn great introduction that builds up the type of character Amuro is with very strong actions. But how people even talk about him adds even more layers to the type of human being Amuro is. He was ignoring the evacuation orders at the beginning, but he was also ignoring his friend Frabo and the food she routinely seems to be bringing him, as well as his own personal hygiene. Everyone around him seems to be aware of this, and even people like Hayato have some sort of resentment towards Amuro because of his father and his ties to the military. Everyone has some sort of varying opinion on Amuro, whether it actually has something to do with him or not. And it makes it worse considering how much Amuro shuts himself away from everyone else, and it all becomes perfectly clear when we take into account his interactions, or lack thereof, with his absent father. When he asked his father, I thought to myself when I first saw that episode, you know what? I feel like you're asking deep down, is your work more important than me? And I found that insanely weird. I mean, obviously Amuro has shown concern to the other civilians, but maybe it was because I went into this knowing it had a tremendous influence on the Shinji Ikari and Gendo Ikari dynamic in Evangelion, but everything that was shown and communicated in this episode, whether it was Tem's dialogue involving his son in the war effort, and Amuro's annoyed tone of voice whenever his father is mentioned, paired along with his horrid hygiene and body language, I was already subconsciously aware of the troubled and complicated relationship these two had and what happened because of it. The thing that this episode gets remembered for is obviously how everything can change in a mere instant. And that honestly made me think about a particular pattern I noticed upon rewatching. And it's involving the decisions one makes and how others end up because of those choices. I've briefly mentioned about how Tem's decision to prioritize the Gundam's loading to the White Base over the fleeing civilians was a very bad one to make ethically speaking, but Jean out of Amuro and his father made the worst one. This mission was stated time and time again was one of reconnaissance, and Jean in his urge to prove himself like Char would, opened fire on mobile suit parts and eventually caused civilians to get caught in the crossfires once the Federation got involved. It's a decision that he paid for later on, but it's a choice that robbed Frabo, Hayato, Kai, Amuro, and a ton of civilians of any sense of normality in their lives going forward. It's all sorts of messed up seeing Frabo, a very kind and caring girl, witnessing her parents' and grandparents' death and being forced to stumble on without them. It just breaks my heart talking about it. But Amuro, he's the one who makes the most important decision out of anyone here. I could sit here and talk about how awesome this moment is and how incredible the Gundam is, but it's been said a million times already. And at this point, we all know how great this moment is in regards to how sick it is. But what makes this moment as good as it is what I just talked about in the past few minutes. All of that terror, hopelessness, and despair is swelled away as this boy moves this powerful machine to take down the overwhelming oppressor. But even in a Gundam, he still feels horrified. It's one of the aspects that I love about this scene. He found the courage to stand up when nobody else could, but upon wasting his Vulcans in an attack of wasted effort, he also can't help but freeze in fear when he has no idea what to even do when he becomes face to face with a Zaku.
What? あれが  連邦軍 の モビルスーツ の 威力 なのか?
The last thing I'll touch on in this fantastic moment is how Amuro's lack of experience is juxtaposed against the Gundam's abilities. When the Gundam itself reacted as the Zaku got up close, Amuro was speechless. But that one moment sparked something within him, and his resolve sharpened. Amuro's use of the Gundam to take down Jean is both effortlessly cool and terrifying at the same time, but once again, his lack of experience takes the forefront. And his decision to lash out in anger rather than thinking through resulted in a hole being blown into the colony, and his father seemingly flying out to his own death. It's something that he has to live with, and as the second Zaku charges towards him, he is allowed that second chance to not rely on the Gundam's awesome power and to think things through, and to end the fighting in the least destructive way possible. What an incredible way to end this off. The second I finished this scene when I first watched this episode, I knew I was in for a truly special series the second this dynamic between pilot and mobile suit was set up. As the rest of the episode goes, it's nothing too crazy. It ends up setting up what will follow due to Jean and Amuro's actions, but it choosing to close with Char saying,
認めたくないものだな。自分自身の若さゆえの過ちというもの。
It's such a brilliant fucking choice. It's clear Char is talking about Jean and how his ignorance and desire to prove himself was responsible for his own downfall and the mission going awry, but it's also interesting to apply this line to Amuro and how his lack of experience also got people hurt. He ended up buying people time, yes, but he could have also killed a lot more people. He's a young pilot who still has room to learn and mistakes to conquer, and by overcoming these obstacles will mark Amuro's growth from a scared, frightened, and oftentimes selfish young boy to a confident, selfless, and powerful pilot. But we're still at the beginning, and this closing line really does a fantastic job at establishing this solid starting point for our main character. And what a way to ring home what I was talking about this entire time.
Hey guys, I opened up a membership. It's not mandatory, but I could do more later. I don't know, it's $2. But if the demand for a Team's Quest... But if the demand for a Team's Cast question corner shows up, then I will fold. Thanks, bye. I love you guys, bye.
Given how I've spent a whole video talking about arguably the best episode from Yoshiyuki Tomino's series, I want to test something for those who haven't seen more of Tomino's non-Gundam works or are on the fence. Because outside of Gundam, he's directed a lot of great shows that I think are really worth watching. And I want to recommend you guys to check out some of his first episodes. And if you find them interesting, let me know if you end up sticking with them. First off, Space Runaway Ideon. I think this first episode is very reminiscent of Gundam's first episode, and it's not hard to see why. The thing you'll see a lot of in Tomino's series is that the story starts right in the middle of things almost instantly, and picks up rather quickly, which is something I really appreciated with this episode. There's a lot of elements and characters that are introduced along with a big mystery involving a certain robot, but it never gets to the point where it gets hard to follow at all. I wouldn't say it's as good as Gundam's first episode, but I still found it extremely engaging. The way the characters come off can be really over the top and even hilarious at times, which really did a great job in making me garner more interest in them as the several episode long conflict between two races begins. And of course, the first episode kept giving me questions that I really wanted answers to. Great episode. Next up is Combat Mecha Zabungle. Zabungle is so fun, man. The first episode might be one of my favorites just for how unique everything about it is. The golden rule that this world revolves around, the setting itself, and the multiple characters that are just so fun and exciting to follow made me a Zabungle lover after just this one episode. It's so weird at times, and I mean that in the best way possible. It's probably Tomino's funniest series out there, and almost immediately the cast bounces off each other in an extremely entertaining way. I really like this one despite it not being Tomino's best. I especially recommend checking this out if you love Gundam Double Zeta because it's really damn funny at times. I guarantee you'll have a blast. There's a lot more that I obviously can't go into without making this video a lot longer than it already is, but these are some of my favorites from Tomino's series. I just want to talk a bit about how great a lot of his shows kick off, and I will always encourage fans of Tomino's Gundam series and films to check out his non-Gundam works, and hey, it can even help you appreciate his Gundam works even more if you find some enjoyment in places that you can least expect. If it hasn't been made clear yet, I think this episode is in a league of its own. The sheer brilliance of this episode I feel hasn't been topped in an anime in recent memory. But as of recently, I have seen some shows that have definitely sparked and invoked the same feelings that I had when I saw this first episode almost 6 years ago. But the point I just want to make was that as first episodes go, this one is easily my favorite. And while yeah, I don't obviously give too much away about those other 2 Tomino episodes, I left it that way in case a newcomer somehow hasn't seen it and feels a tiny bit more motivated to try it out. Because at the end of the day, helping people find a little bit more enthusiasm or excitement into getting into another Tomino series means a lot to me. Thanks again for watching, guys. We're almost at 6,000 subscribers, and while not a huge milestone to some, it's still pretty big for me. So thanks again for the now 5 years of support, and I'll see you all next time.